The 2025 WNBA season has been historic, shattering attendance records and continuing to build a fan base that makes the league one of the most talked about sports across America. Hello and welcome to USA Today's The Excerpt. I'm Dana Taylor. As the contract deadline of October 31st approaches, negotiations are at a standstill. Players and fans alike are contemplating the very real possibility of no 2020-26 season. What are the sticking points here, and how might players pivot? Here to help us dig into all of it, I'm joined by my colleagues, USA Today sports columnist Nancy Armour and USA Today's national women's sports reporter Cydney Henderson. It's good to have you both on The Excerpt.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Dana.
Cindy, I'll start with you. Let's start with laying out the big sticking points that still need to be negotiated.
Yeah, so the players have prioritized two main points of concern, and that is going to be increased revenue sharing and structure salary. So, as the league has continued to skyrocket in popularity and viewership is up, jersey sales are up, attendance is up, but that hasn't necessarily trickled down to the players. And as Kelsey Plum put it at the WNBA All Star game in Indianapolis, they want a piece of the entire pie, not a piece of a part of a pie. Piece of a part of a pie. With the increased revenue sharing, they are seeking a model that grows as the WNBA and as the league grows. So right now, the WNBA players under the current CBA receive about 9.3% of the league revenue, according to MarketWatch, and that is significantly lower than other professional sports teams. The NBA, for example, receives about 49 to 51% of revenue sharing, or the players, receive 49 to 51% of revenue sharing. So you can kind of see the disparity in the leagues. Also, they are focused on payment structure salaries. So right now, salaries cap out at about $250,000, and they feel that that undervalues them. So they're seeking more money on all scales. Nneka Ogumide, who is for the Seattle Storm, also is the president of the Players Association. She said that the league is proposing more of a fixed percentage over time for the revenue sharing, while they are seeking something that grows with the times and grows with the popularity.
Nancy, Caitlin Clark is among several star players that have made this sport so electrifying for both hardcore fans and casual newcomers. But Caitlin and a few others sustained some injuries that put an early end to their season. Did that have a big impact on attendance?
Not really. The WNBA surpassed its previous high for attendance in August, which was a full month before the end of the season started. They drew, as of the middle of August, they had drawn about 2.5 million fans, which again, league high. You're seeing people tune in, even people who came into the league with Caitlin Clark as fans of hers have gotten to know the rest of the league. And so that's translated into higher attendance numbers, higher ratings numbers. You also saw the Golden State Valkyries, which was an expansion team this year. They sold out every single game in an NBA arena. So that helped boost attendance. The numbers for the All-Star game in terms of ratings were down, but the numbers for the playoffs were up about 5% over last year. So no, we're not seeing a negative effect. Obviously, Caitlin does draw more eyes. Fans of hers were disappointed, but the league itself is growing and is interesting enough to stand on its own.
Cydney, let's talk about the Toronto Tempo and Portland Fire, the two teams set to join the league and compete in their first season as the 14th and 15th franchises of the W. What happens to them if this new contract isn't signed at the end of October?
That's what adds to this compelling offseason, because without a new CBA signed into effect, there would be no expansion drafts. We saw last season when the Golden State Valkyries entered for their inaugural season in 2025, they held their expansion draft in December of 2024. So if that lays the framework, that means that the Toronto Tempo and the Portland Fire would hold theirs also in December, but they can't do that without a CBA. Kathy Engelberg, the WNBA commissioner, said during her press conference ahead of the WNBA finals that they have given general managers of each team guidelines on how a multi expansion draft would go. But they aren't able to give an exact format because that is something that is also collectively bargained and they are negotiating right now. So it kind of leaves the new teams in limbo until new CBA is signed so they can have their expansion drafts and get their inaugural players.
So, if the 2026 WNBA season gets canceled, Nancy, let's talk about the options for the players, beginning with a new league called Unrivaled. Tell me about that. Who runs it? Do they have a season that's going to interfere with the Ws? And how do players feel about it?
No, well, and first of all, an entire season being canceled is a pretty extreme measure. So I don't, and I don't think anyone has even talked about that. But there are other options for players if the league does not start on time. Several players play overseas, whether it's Turkey or China, other European leagues, and Unrivaled obviously has grown in popularity and interest for players playing. Unrivaled is the 3-on-3 league that was started by Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier. This will be its second season. It's expanding. It's added 2 teams, and it's going to play a game in Philadelphia. All of its other games are in Miami. This has been a huge boon for players because their salaries are far greater than they are in the W. Players have ownership stake in the league. And, this is Unrivaled is another indication of how much interest there is in women's basketball right now. When this league started in last winter, they already had a TV contract. They already had big name sponsors, traditional, sponsors, not just necessarily associated with women's brands. You had, some of the sponsors that you traditionally see in, men's sports were interested in this league. So there are other options, which then puts more pressure on the W because if players can keep in shape, have places to play, and earn money, they're not solely dependent on the WNBA.
We all love a good highlight reel. I'm going to ask this of both of you. What was the highlight or memorable moment for you this season? I'll start with you, Nancy.
I'm going to give you 2 of them. For just in terms of pure play, I think Asia Wilson's shot over Alyssa Thomas and DeWanna Bonner during the NBA Finals. It's one of those iconic moments that we think of Jordan's shot in Salt Lake City in the NBA playoffs. This is going to be one of those moments that we're going to be thinking about and seeing for decades. But I think what was most notable was at the All-Star game, the players came out for pregame warmups wearing shirts that said, "Pay us what you owe us." And to me, that reminded me a lot of the U.S. women's national team at the 2019 World Cup when they were suing U.S. soccer for equal pay, basically. And fans really rallied around them. When they had the trophy ceremony in 2019, fans were chanting equal pay, equal play, equal pay, equal pay. And the t-shirts that the W players were wearing, fans immediately bought them. They generated the creation of another t-shirt that said, "Pay them what you owe them," that we've seen fans wearing everywhere throughout the W the rest of the season. And I think that just shows you, and it probably shows the WNBA and the NBA, which is a primary owner of the league, that this is not business as usual. The players have the fans on their side, and that is going to make a huge difference going forward in these negotiations.
Cydney, did she steal your highlight? What was the memorable moment for you this season?
Yeah, I would have to agree with Nancy and kind of broaden it to say the WNBA finals as a whole. Being able to be with the teams and cover it, this was the first time that it expanded to the best of 7. Although the Aces did sweep the Mercury in 4 games, so the minimum amount of games needed to win. Some of the contests came down to the last possession, so it did seem a little bit competitive in some game, a little bit more competitive than the series 4-0. But I will say that the Aces and their just journey to NBA champions, they've talked about it heavily of this being the most adversity they've faced. So to see a team be below 500 or around 500 at the All-Star break and to basically turn on the Jets, go on a 16-game winning streak to end the regular season and carry that on to the postseason was pretty remarkable. As Nancy said, Asia was shot heard around the world. But a lot of her supporting cast also stepped up. So Jackie Young, Jewel Lloyd, Dana Evans, the last 2 coming off the bench. So I would say just to see their collective them being able to turn around the season so remarkably and end it with a dominant win in the finals was a highlight for me for sure.
Nancy, is the WNBA meteoric rise here to stay? How can the league keep the momentum going into 2026 and beyond?
Yeah, I think that's what is the most exciting thing for people who care about women's sports and frankly care about women. this is not a moment. This is not a blip. This is, the foundation, or this is building on the foundation of growth that there's been over the last, I'd say, 6 or 7 years. And I think what you're seeing now is you're seeing the WNBA and other women's sports being talked about in casual conversation. We've always talked about men's sports, water cooler conversations that, on Mondays, you talk about what you saw in an NFL game, or you might talk about what you saw in the baseball playoffs. We're seeing that now with the WNBA and women's basketball and women's soccer. And once you have that, once you have people who might have casual interests, but they're paying enough attention to know what's going on, and that leads into their everyday conversations, that's not something you can walk back. That's not something that's going to fade away. Is the WNBA going to be on this rocket fuel trajectory that it's been on the last couple of years? Probably not. That's not sustainable for any business, league, anything. But I do think that you're going to see sustained growth. And I think we're going to reach a point, probably sooner rather than later, that, the W is as much a part of the conversation, as much a part of the sporting landscape as any men's league.
And last question for both of you. I'll start with you, Cydney. What are the storylines you're already thinking about for this offseason through next year and then 2026?
I would say free agency. There are a staggering amount of players that are going into the 2026 season as free agents. A lot of players did not sign a contract past this 2025 season that just ended because a new CBA and potentially more money is on the line. So that means the biggest stars on the biggest teams may be switching teams. So expect a lot of movement in the off season. But one thing I will say is that free agency normally gets underway in January, but again, that is going to be contingent on a new CBA being signed.
And Nancy, what about you? What storylines are you thinking about right now?
Well, I'd echo Cydney on the free agency. That's going to be fascinating to see all the movement. But I'm also very, very interested to see how the two expansion teams did or do this year. The Valkyries, as I mentioned, were an expansion team this past season, and they really rewrote the book on what it means to be an expansion team. They made the playoffs. They finished above 500. They had sellout crowds for every single game. So they have shown what is possible for a new team. And will Toronto and Portland be able to do the same thing? I don't know. We'll see.
Nancy and Cydney, thank you so much for joining me on The Excerpt.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for watching. I'm Dana Taylor. I'll see you next time.